My son left me at a nursing home the way someone gets rid of an inconvenient problem. He opened the car door, grabbed my purse, avoided my eyes, and decided on his own that I was no longer part of his life. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, please stay with me until the end. I'm going to tell you exactly how this happened and how I found out who was really in charge of that place. There was no argument, no explanation, just that short sentence spoken without conviction. It's temporary, Mom. Temporary for the one who leaves almost always becomes permanent for the one who stays. When the car door closed, I felt it hit my body before my mind could catch up. My stomach dropped. My legs weakened for a second. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there, gripping my purse too tightly, as if it were the last proof that I still had a life outside those walls. The building's facade was clean, bright, overly organized. The kind of order that doesn't welcome you, it controls you. The air smelled strongly of disinfectant, the kind that stings your nose just a little. Everything was far too quiet for a place full of people. And that's when something inside me went cold. That silence wasn't peace. It was a decision made without me. At the front desk, they asked for my documents before asking my name. Papers appeared quickly. A pen was placed in my hand. I signed because I'd always trusted too much the people who claimed they were taking care of me. A bracelet tightened around my wrist. They adjusted it without asking if it hurt. It did, but I swallowed hard. I told myself he'd be back after lunch. I made the bed like someone who didn't want to settle in. I watched other women walking slowly down the hallways, their eyes no longer asking questions. That frightened me more than the abandonment. When night came and he didn't return, I understood with painful clarity. This wasn't just a son leaving. It was someone deciding that I no longer needed to be consulted about my own life. And I didn't know it yet, but there was a command inside that place, an invisible hand, a name that made doors open and mouths close. If this story stirred something you've lived through, like, subscribe, and share it with a woman who needs to be seen. And tell me in the comments, has someone ever made a huge decision about your life without asking you? That first night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, my body took longer to rest than my mind. The mattress was too firm, the pillow too high. Everything felt adjusted for someone who wasn't me. I turned from side to side, my back protesting, while my memory did what it always does when the silence grows too loud. I went back many years. I remembered my son as a small child, the way he used to hold my finger to cross the street, afraid of cars he barely notices today. I remembered the sleepless nights when fever and coughing seemed endless, and I sat by his bed with my hand on his back just to make sure he was breathing steadily. After his father died, I promised I would always be there. I said it out loud. It wasn't an empty promise. I worked more than my body could handle. I swallowed exhaustion. I postponed my own wants. I never threw that in anyone's face. I thought love worked that way, quiet, steady, patient. At some point, I stopped being a priority. There was no warning, no conversation. First came the shorter phone calls, then the rushed visits, then decisions made to make things easier. Always to make his life easier, never mine. I was slowly moved to the background, almost gently. At the nursing home, I tried to keep that same logic. I told myself it was just a phase, that he was overwhelmed, that this was for the best. You learn to justify the absence of someone you love because it hurts less than admitting abandonment. The next morning, walking through the hallways, I felt the weight of the place settle into my body. Everything ran on schedules that were too rigid. Breakfast at 7, medications at 8, enforced silence at 9, There was no room for delays, no space for questions outside the timetable. The clock had more authority there than any person. The staff were polite but distant. They smiled without their eyes. They moved quickly like people following invisible orders. I noticed that nothing was ever fully explained. Answers came pre-packaged, sealed shut, like doors you try to open and can't. I began watching the other women. Some talked to themselves in low voices. Others stared at a television that wasn't even on. What they all shared wasn't age. It was resignation, a kind of exhaustion that didn't come from the body, but from a lifetime of over-explaining. I sat alone for a while, feeling the bracelet press lightly against my wrist. That constant pressure seemed to remind me again and again that I was under control. I tried to remember the last time someone had asked what I truly wanted. I couldn't, and that scared me. There, among silent hallways and enclosed schedules, I began to understand that abandonment doesn't happen all at once. It's built little by little while you're still too busy being strong. And it was on that second day, without drama, without scandal, that I realized that place wasn't just about care, it was about order. And I still didn't know the price of living outside it. My son came back the next morning, not to see me, but to finish what he had started. He arrived smelling of fresh coffee, wearing that expression he always had when he was late for something more important. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, avoided my eyes right after. For a second, he hesitated. Not enough to stay, just enough to show that he knew exactly what he was doing. He said he needed to take care of the paperwork. He said it quietly, almost gently, as if the problem were the volume of the conversation, not the content. At the front desk, everything happened too fast. The attendant already had my information on the screen. My name appeared for a moment and then turned into a number. Papers were placed in front of me. Explanations came in short, technical phrases, too rushed for anyone to truly absorb. Before I could finish a question, the pen was already in my hand. I signed without reading everything, not out of trust, out of embarrassment. My son kept checking his watch, sighing, repeating that he had to go. That same old sigh he used when I took too long at the grocery store, when I asked too many questions, when I took up space. I felt something tighten around my wrist, the white bracelet. They adjusted it once, too tight, adjusted it again, even tighter. I asked if it really needed to be that snug. The answer came with a smile. It's standard. The cold plastic against my skin sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with temperature. My son said he'd be back over the weekend. He didn't promise. He informed. He kissed my forehead like someone completing a learned ritual. When he walked away, he turned back for half a second. He didn't say anything. That half second stayed with me for the rest of the day. I arranged my few belongings in the room, folded clothes slowly as if I were only passing through, chose where to place my purse even knowing I might not need to unpack it all. The body acts before the mind accepts. Before lunch, I tried to ask to call my son. They said there is a specific time for that. I asked if I could step outside for some air. They said yes, but with authorization. Everything came wrapped in politeness and short on freedom. I sat at a table with other women. The plates arrived before any conversation. Some ate quickly, others pushed food around with their forks. No one asked where I was from. No one seemed to be waiting for anyone. When the afternoon passed and my son didn't come back, something inside me quietly adjusted. It wasn't despair, it was alertness. This hadn't been impulsive, it had been organized, thought out, made convenient. With my documents out of reach and that bracelet pressing into my skin, I understood something that made me breathe deeper. I hadn't just been left there, I had been placed. I spent the rest of that day waiting, but not in a dramatic way. It was a restrained, almost polite kind of waiting, as if I still believed people didn't do this sort of thing to someone they called mom, as if it were all too big a mistake to be real. I made the bed with excessive care, smoothed the sheets more than once, ran my palm over the pillowcase, feeling the rough fabric against my skin. It was my silent way of saying I didn't belong there, that I wouldn't be staying long, that someone would come get me. I studied the room. The pale walls held no pictures, no marks, no photos, nothing that said who had passed through. The mirror was mounted too high, forcing you to lift your chin just to see yourself. That wasn't accidental. A place where you barely see yourself makes forgetting easier. I stepped into the hallway. Other women moved slowly, each at her own pace, but all following an invisible current. Some held empty cups as if they still had something to do with them. Others always sat in the same spots. No one seemed to be waiting for visitors. I tried to start a conversation with one of them, smiled, said good morning. She answered politely, but without curiosity. A quick, practiced smile. It wasn't unkindness, it was surrender, and that hurt more than rudeness ever could. When the clock marked the end of the afternoon, I sat near the front desk. I wanted to be visible. I wanted him to see me first if he walked in. I watched every door open, every set of footsteps that approached. None of them were his. I quietly asked if there were any visitors for me. The response came automatically. There's nothing in the system. System. The word landed heavily in the air. My son had become a data point. So had I. Dinner came early. I ate very little. My mouth was dry, my stomach closed. My body grew tired quickly, even though I hadn't done anything physical. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to adjust to a reality imposed without warning. At night, the sounds sharpened, doors locking, measured footsteps in the hall, low voices that didn't use names. I heard numbers, schedules, short commands, not people. Lying in bed, I felt the bracelet mark my wrist. It didn't truly hurt, but it pressed enough to remind me I was under control. I tried to remember the last time my son had asked how I was really doing. I couldn't. That frightened me more than the silence around me. I thought about getting up to ask to call him. I didn't. Something in me understood quickly that insisting too early came with a cost, that the place worked better when you accepted things without questioning, at least in the beginning. I closed my eyes with a certainty forming slowly, heavy and uncomfortable. That night wasn't just the first of many. It was the beginning of a test, and I still didn't know the rules. On the second day, I stopped waiting. Waiting made me weak. Watching kept me upright. It wasn't a conscious decision. My body realized it first. The constant tightness in my chest eased slightly once I began paying attention to what was happening around me, as if understanding the terrain gave me back a measure of control over myself. I noticed that the schedules there weren't just organized, they were inflexible. Breakfast at exactly 7, medication at 8, silence imposed right after. Anyone who ran late lost out. Anyone who asked questions received a different look. Not scolding, correction. Small, discreet, efficient. I started noticing who gave orders and who followed them. Some staff members moved with confidence, spoke little, and decided quickly. Others asked permission for everything, even to move a cup. The hierarchy wasn't written on any wall, but it showed in posture, tone of voice, and the exaggerated care taken not to make mistakes. I began walking more slowly through the hallways, not from difficulty, but to hear better. Voices lowered when I approached, conversations paused mid-sentence. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Then I realized it was a pattern. I also watched the residents. Some were never called by name, only by room number. Others, curiously, received special attention. A different cup, a gentler tone, a "I'll be back later" that actually happened. That wasn't random. I sat beside an elderly woman who asked to change seats in the dining room. Her answer came with a smile. That's not how it works here. She apologized as if she'd committed a serious offense. The next day, I noticed her dessert never came. No explanation, no complaint. Everything continued as normal. That's when I understood. Fear wasn't spread through violence. It was distributed methodically. I started feeling it in my body, greater care in how I spoke, a slight tension in my shoulders, constant attention to not saying too much. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because making a mistake meant losing small things that added up to something unbearable. I watched the parking lot through a side window. Few cars, always the same ones, always at the same times. I thought about my son, about how quickly everything had been handled, about how easily my documents had changed hands. This hadn't been improvised. Little by little, a certainty formed inside me, quiet but firm. That place didn't run on rules alone. It ran on control. And every system of control has someone at the top, someone who doesn't always show up, but who decides everything. Finding out who was in charge wasn't curiosity, it was necessity. Because by then, I already knew if I wanted to leave that place intact, I needed to understand the system before it finished understanding me. It was on the third day that someone truly saw me. It didn't happen in any obvious way. There was no formal introduction, no long conversation. It was a detail too small for anyone who wasn't paying attention, but big enough for someone who had been ignored for far too long. She came closer while I was folding my sheet, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She spoke softly, not because silence was required, but because speaking softly there was a way to survive. She asked if I was adjusting. It wasn't the question, it was the look. She waited for the answer. I read the name on the crooked badge pinned to her uniform, Elaine. Her face showed fatigue, but her eyes were alert. The eyes of someone who observes more than she speaks, someone who has seen too much to be easily surprised. I said I was still settling in. She nodded slowly, like someone who understood something that hadn't been said out loud. She stayed a few seconds longer than necessary. She didn't seem rushed. In that place, that was rare. She started talking about small things. Which hallway stayed emptier in the afternoons, what time the common room TV was usually turned off, which staff members were best avoided if I didn't want headaches. Everything said casually, like comments about the weather, but I felt the weight behind every sentence. Elaine never raised her voice, never argued, never drew attention to herself. Even so, I noticed that some residents relaxed when she entered a room. Others, on the contrary, avoided talking to her. That caught my attention. People who help too much often pay a quiet price. At one point, while straightening my bed, she mentioned that I should keep my personal documents with me whenever possible. She said it the way someone gives a household tip, but for one split second, her eyes turned serious. I asked why. She glanced down the hallway before answering, said only that things had a way of getting lost. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. That sentence fit perfectly with everything I'd been observing since I arrived. Before leaving, Elaine lightly touched my arm. The gesture was quick, almost imperceptible. She said something that made me swallow hard. Here, people who ask too many questions too early usually regret it. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, delivered with care. That night, my body felt more tense when I lay down, stiff shoulders, a locked jaw, not from immediate fear, but from awareness of risk. I had been seen, not by the system, but by someone who could still tell the difference between people and numbers. I thought about Elaine for a long time, about the risks she took by saying anything outside protocol, about how good people learn to protect themselves by becoming almost invisible. And I thought that if someone like her still took risks, it meant not everything in that place was completely lost. She didn't promise to help me. She didn't offer to save anyone. She only gave me information, and their information was more valuable than comfort. That's when I understood something important. I wasn't alone, but I wasn't safe either. There were people watching like me, people who knew more than they said, people waiting for the right moment to speak. And in that moment, I realized that finding an ally wasn't about blind trust. It was about listening, patience, reading the room. Because in that place, even help had rules, and breaking them too early could cost you dearly. The first confrontation didn't come with aggression. It came with too much politeness. It happened when I asked for something simple, nothing that could be seen as rebellion. I just asked if I could change my shower time. That slot made me dizzy after my morning medication. I spoke calmly, choosing my words the way I'd learned to do my whole life so I wouldn't sound ungrateful. The woman in front of me listened with her head slightly tilted, as if she were paying close attention. When I finished, she smiled, a proper, trained smile, the kind that doesn't fade even when the subject changes. She said she understood my concern, but that the rules existed for everyone's well-being. She spoke slowly, like she was explaining something obvious to someone overly sensitive. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask if there was another option. She simply informed me it wouldn't be possible. I insisted a little more, said I didn't feel well at that time, that it wasn't a complaint, it was self-care. As I spoke, I felt my shoulders tense. My breathing grew shallow. My body realized before I did that I was crossing an invisible line. Her smile changed. It didn't disappear, it hardened. That's when she addressed me by my room number, not my name. She corrected herself quickly, apologized in a mechanical way, but the message had already landed. My name wasn't necessary there, my individuality even less. What mattered was that the machine kept running without friction. Before ending the conversation, she added something I hadn't asked about. She said my son was aware of all decisions. She used his name like a seal, an argument meant to shut down any debate, as if being a mother automatically canceled the right to disagree. I left the room feeling hot, but with an oddly clear mind. That hadn't been a conversation, it had been a warning. And the warning came fast. That same afternoon, I noticed small changes. My name wasn't called for the afternoon snack. My medication arrived later than usual. When I asked about it, they said it was a logistics issue. Always logistics, a word broad enough to hide any intention. Some looks shifted. Staff members who used to greet me now only nodded from a distance. Others avoided me. It wasn't hostility, it was self-protection. The system had reacted. I returned to my room with a tense body, jaw clenched, but my mind clear. I hadn't done anything wrong, and that was exactly why their reaction said more about them than about me. I remembered Elaine's warning. People who ask too many questions too early usually regret it. I asked, and I learned. That night, I heard my name replaced by a number more than once. I heard doors closing without warning. I heard footsteps stop outside my door, then move on. Everything discreet, everything organized. That's when I understood something essential. In that place, dignity had a price, and the price was silence. But I also understood something else, something far more dangerous for them. If questions caused reactions, it was because they touched something sensitive, and sensitive things tend to hide truths too big to be exposed all at once. I went to bed knowing I'd made my first strategic mistake. I asked too early. But I also knew with calm clarity that now I understood exactly where I was standing. And once you learn that, you rarely walk in the dark again. The confirmation didn't come as a grand revelation. It came as a detail too small to ignore. I was sitting near the common room when I heard a last name repeated. It wasn't said loudly, it was said carefully, with a restrained respect I hadn't yet seen directed at any of us. The staff member stood up quickly, straightened her uniform, shifted her tone, all in seconds. My body reacted before my mind. My back straightened, my attention sharpened. I started paying closer attention. The same last name surfaced in interrupted conversations, in whispered phone calls, in doors that opened without being logged. People came in without passing through reception, without bracelets, without explanation, and no one questioned it, no one dared. Some rules clearly didn't apply to everyone. While we had rigid schedules for everything, bathing, medication, meals, rest, there were those who moved freely, rooms that were never inspected, decisions made without justification, always accompanied by ready-made phrases. It's a special case. Don't worry about that. Everything is under control. But nothing felt out of control. On the contrary, everything felt over-controlled. I began to notice who received fewer visits. It wasn't just women without family. It was women who had questioned something, who had asked for explanations, who had insisted just a little beyond what was allowed. I saw one of them transferred to another wing without notice. The day before, she complained about her medication. The next day, no one knew where she was. When I asked, they said it was for her comfort. The word comfort surfaced again, serving as an answer to everything. My stomach tightened, not from immediate fear, from recognition. I started associating that last name with the privileges I saw, with open doors, with fast decisions, with the looks that changed when it was mentioned. That place had an owner, not just on paper, in practice, in the silent fear that spread when the name came up. And little by little, something even harder began to fall into place. I remembered my son's urgency, how easily my documents had been handed over, the confident tone when they said he was aware of everything. This hadn't been improvised. It had been a referral, a ready-made solution for someone who no longer wanted to decide. The thought hurt. A weight pressed into my chest as if the air had thinned. I breathed deeply and didn't accept that conclusion right away. Some truths need confirmation before they're faced. Said too early, they break the people who still need to remain whole. So I watched more. I noticed that some residents didn't receive visits, not because no one wanted to see them, but because someone had decided for them. Calls filtered, messages summarized, the outside world reduced to convenient versions. There, dignity was negotiable, autonomy was a favor, and those who complained too much became a problem. That night, I sat on my bed and felt the weight of the day settle on my shoulders. Fear was there, yes, but it came with something new. Clarity. I wasn't imagining things. What I felt had logic, structure, command. I still didn't know the full name of the person in charge, but I knew he existed. I knew he was close. And above all, I knew my abandonment hadn't been just an individual act. It had been part of something larger. A system that worked best when no one asked questions. After that night, something shifted inside me. It wasn't sudden courage, it was awareness. I started seeing the nursing home not as a place of care, but as a territory with its own rules, invisible borders, and punishments that made no noise. I began to understand why some women never received visitors. It wasn't always abandonment. Often it was blockage. Phone calls were forgotten, messages were misplaced, letters arrived late or never. Little by little, the outside world grew too distant to miss. And when something no longer feels missed, no one feels urgency to reach for it. I watched one woman ask to keep a cookie in her pocket. The staff member didn't scold her. She simply looked firm and said, "That's not allowed here." The woman apologized. The next day, I noticed her dessert didn't come. No explanation, no complaint. The system worked because it was hard to prove anything. These small losses accumulated in the body, a tightness in the chest, a constant tension in the shoulders, a desire to speak that died before becoming words. Fear there didn't shout, it trained. I also noticed that it wasn't just us residents living under control. Some staff members moved constantly, eyes too alert. Others avoided longer conversations as if any extra sentence could be used against them. Fear flowed through the hallways and kept everything in order. Dignity there was conditional. It depended on behavior, on silence, on not being inconvenient. Those who fit survived better. Those who questioned too much slowly disappeared. From a wing, from a schedule, from a routine. That's when I realized something even crueler. Abandonment there was progressive. First, they separated you from your family. Then they separated you from yourself, until what remained was someone who obeyed without remembering why. I started cataloging everything more carefully in my memory. Times when certain doors were locked. Days when residents were taken for evaluations without explanation. Sudden shifts in staff mood when someone insisted too much. Nothing isolated, everything connected. I spoke less, asked fewer questions, not out of submission, but strategy. The less visible I became, the more I saw. The less I reacted, the safer they felt, and people who feel safe make mistakes. Even so, there were days when the weight hit hard. I missed small things, choosing when to have coffee, deciding where to sit, walking without asking permission. Simple freedoms that, once taken, make you shrink without realizing it. But there was something they still hadn't taken from me, the memory of who I had been outside those walls. I remembered the decisions I'd made, the people who had depended on me, the difficult situations I handled without help. That made a difference. While many there had already convinced themselves they weren't worth the effort, I still knew I was, and that quiet certainty began to hold me up. I didn't have concrete proof yet, but I had conviction, and conviction, when cared for properly, becomes direction. At that point, I was no longer just resisting the place. I was learning how it worked. And anyone who learns how a system works eventually finds the flaw. She called me by my full name, not by my room number, not by ma'am, by my full name, first and last, as if she were pulling back something that had been slowly stripped away from me. I lifted my head instantly. My heart sped up, partly from surprise, partly from relief. She was one of the longest-standing residents there. Small, fragile posture, hands always folded in her lap. Many people spoke to her as if she were always confused. Some staff exaggerated their patience, the kind that doesn't truly listen. But the look she gave me in that moment was firm, present, clear. She asked me to sit beside her. She spoke softly, but without fear. She said she knew I'd been observing. She didn't ask, she stated it. A slow shiver ran through me. It wasn't accusation, it was recognition. She began by telling stories, not secrets, stories. She spoke about women who arrived lucid, opinionated, with a will of their own. She talked about how little by little those women were adjusted, a medication here, a schedule there, an evaluation at just the right moment, always done for their own good. She pressed her lips together slightly, like someone who'd heard that phrase far too many times. As she spoke, I felt the weight on my shoulders increase, not from immediate fear, but from alignment. Everything she said matched too perfectly with what I'd been feeling. This wasn't paranoia, it was pattern. She knew dates, she knew names, she knew who tended to disappear after insisting too much. She knew which families believed everything they were told because they wanted to believe, because trusting was easier than confronting. She told me some residents had tried to complain. One wrote letters, another asked a nephew who was a lawyer for help. None of them made it to the end, and the evaluation always appeared halfway through, a document questioning their lucidity. Someone always said they were confused. Then she said something that lodged itself inside me. Here, whoever controls the narrative controls sanity. If they say you're not well, no one listens to what you say, and when no one listens, you slowly stop existing, not through death, through disposal. I asked why she was telling me all this now. She took her time answering. took a deep breath, looked around, said she was tired of carrying it alone, said I still walked with the posture of someone who hadn't accepted being erased, that I still made eye contact, that it was rare there. Then she spoke about the man who was in charge. She didn't give his full name. She said she didn't need to, that I'd probably already heard the last name, that he didn't appear often, but when he did, everything shifted. Staff grew tense, rules bent, doors opened without explanation. And then came the part that hurt most. She said that many times the children didn't abandon their parents on their own. They were guided, reassured, convinced they were doing the right thing, that someone else would take over, that they wouldn't have to worry anymore. Some felt too relieved to question it. The air felt heavier, my chest tightened. My son hadn't just left me there, he had trusted someone. Or worse, he had accepted the convenience of no longer deciding. She held my hand with a strength that didn't match her fragile body, told me I needed to be careful, that observing was good, but storing information was better, that dates, exact phrases, and small details were more dangerous than direct accusations. Before she walked away, she said something I carried with me. They only win because they think we've forgotten who we are. I stayed seated for a long time after she left, body still, mind reorganizing everything. There wasn't shock, it was alignment. Everything I'd been feeling now had witness, history, continuity. I wasn't an isolated case. I was part of a pattern, and patterns, once exposed, stop working. That night lying in bed, I felt something different. Not naive hope, focus. I didn't need to act yet. I needed to be ready. I needed to think before reacting. Because understanding the game didn't make me cruel. It made me prepared. And for the first time since I arrived there, I didn't feel small. I felt like I had enough information to take the next step, even if I didn't yet know what it would be. The notice appeared on my door early that afternoon. A simple piece of paper, folded in half, with my name written correctly for the first time since I arrived. That alone was a warning. Administrative meeting. 2 neutral words, clean, polite, too polite to be harmless. The room was outside the common areas, far from the hallways where the other residents circulated. Beige walls, a table that was too large, chairs positioned to make you feel smaller. I sat down without waiting for an invitation. I learned that asking for permission is also a way of getting up ground. The woman leading the conversation smiled the entire time, a firm, professional smile that didn't change even when the subject did. She began by saying I was adapting well, that they had noticed my interest in the facility's routine. Interest, the word came loaded, like a trait that needed correcting. As she spoke, I felt my body react. Tense shoulders, cold hands, controlled, shallow breathing. My body knew this wasn't dialogue, it was assessment. She said some of my questions had been interpreted as anxiety. She said it gently, like an offer of help. She didn't ask if I felt anxious. She simply informed me that this was how it was being perceived. When I began asking simple questions about schedules, decisions that involved me, the retention of my documents, her smile lost a millimeter of firmness. It was quick, almost invisible, but I saw it. Trained people don't like questions that don't fit the script. Then she used the argument I was expecting. She said my son was concerned about me, that he wanted what was best, that many decisions had been made together. My name was fused to his, as if that ended any possibility of disagreement, as if being a mother automatically erased the right to have one's own will. I asked whether he had been informed about all the recent decisions. The air changed. There was no direct answer. There was deflection, technical terms, long sentences that said nothing. When I calmly insisted, she took a deep breath and said something that sounded like care, but carried threat. If I continued showing difficulty adapting, a more thorough evaluation might be necessary. Evaluation. The word landed heavy in my body. My stomach tightened, my throat went dry. I understood the game instantly. Questioning became a symptom, clarity became risk. From that point on, anything I said could be used against me. I agreed. I nodded. I said I would reflect. I used the most neutral tone I could find. I left the room with a calm body and a racing mind. That conversation hadn't been to hear me, it had been to frame me. On the way back to my room, I noticed the changes almost immediately. 2 whispered conversations that stopped when I passed, a file closed too quickly, a simple request that took hours to be fulfilled. The system had identified me as a risk, but it had also made a mistake. By calling me into that meeting, they had confirmed everything I suspected. They had shown they were paying too much attention, too defensive. No one defends themselves like that when they have nothing to lose. That night, I sat on my bed and organized everything in my head. Dates, exact phrases, shifts in tone, the constant use of my son's name as leverage. It was exhausting, but necessary, because if they wanted to paint me as confused, I would need to be more lucid than ever. I didn't feel fear, I felt focus. I knew I couldn't misjudge the timing. One wrong move and they would silence me with paperwork, diagnoses, and signatures. I needed to be patient, invisible when required, precise when it mattered. That administrative meeting hadn't intimidated me. It had given me confirmation. And from that moment on, everything I did would need to look small, harmless, almost irrelevant, because the next move wouldn't be theirs. It would be mine. After that meeting, I changed on the outside. On the inside, I organized myself. I spoke even less. My sentences grew shorter, my answers neutral. I began smiling at the right moments, agreeing when it didn't matter, appearing exactly like the kind of resident they considered calm and manageable. It wasn't submission, it was camouflage. The less threatening I seemed, the less attention I drew. And attention, and there was danger. My body fell into discipline alongside my mind. Looser shoulders, predictable steps, no hurry that might stand out, no visible curiosity. I became part of the background, and backgrounds aren't watched closely. I started noticing small details, the kind no one thinks important enough to hide. Papers left on counters a few seconds longer than they should have been. Calendars opened to the wrong pages. Names spoken too quickly by people who assumed no one was listening. Dates that repeated with suspicious frequency. I didn't write anything down. I didn't keep notes. I didn't hold on to paper. I knew any physical record could be used against me. My memory became my shelter, and I'd always had a good memory when it mattered. I sat in the same places, walked at the same times, ate at the same pace. I built a routine so regular that no one paid attention to it anymore. Staff stopped noticing what's predictable. That's how mistakes happen. I observed who signed documents and who merely carried them back and forth, who needed permission and who simply informed. It became clear that not everyone there had real power. Many were just executing orders from above without question. Others knew more than they said, but feared their jobs too much to risk it. Fear kept everyone aligned. I paid attention to visitors, always the same people, on similar days, entering through access points we never used. I noticed when files were adjusted after those visits, when difficult residents were relocated shortly afterward. None of it was random. Everything followed sequence. My body sensed things before my mind did. A light tightening in my stomach when something repeated. A strange fatigue when I realized I'd seen the same pattern 3 times. I trusted those sensations. They'd never failed me before. I also began observing my son from a distance. Not through presence, he remained absent, but through consequences. My name appeared in meetings I wasn't part of. Decisions about me continued without my input. He didn't show up, but he kept authorizing, like a signature that doesn't need to be present to be effective. That hurt more than I expected. There are nights when that pain spread through my whole body. Rigid back, shallow sleep, a strange urge to cry that never fully formed. But I didn't let it weaken me. Pain, when not denied, becomes focus, and focus there was essential. I remembered who I'd been outside those walls. The woman who managed bills, solved problems, made hard decisions without anyone to share them with. Planning had never been my weakness. The terrain was different now. The still was still mine. I understood then that direct confrontation wouldn't work. Systems like that don't fall to shouting. They fall to exposure, to the one thing they avoid most, light. But too much light too soon blinds the person trying to use it. So I waited. I waited for errors, for excess, for their confidence to grow. Because systems that feel safe began repeating patterns, and patterns leave trails. At night, before sleeping, I reviewed everything I'd seen during the day, like a silent prayer, not to forget, but to fix it in place. I knew that when the time came, I would need precision. No exaggeration, no visible emotion, just facts. What I was building wasn't revenge, it was repositioning. They saw me as fragile, dependent, disposable. That was the advantage. Underestimated, I could observe without being noticed. Underestimated, I could wait. And I knew the moment would come. Because people who hold too much power start believing no one understands the game, that no one is watching, that no one dares. And that's exactly when control begins to slip. At that point, I was no longer asking whether I would leave that place with dignity. I was asking when the truth would begin surfacing on its own. I just needed to be ready when it did.
The truth didn't arrive as a shock. It arrived as alignment. It was on a morning far too ordinary to announce a turning point. Coffee served on schedule, clean hallways, low voices. But the air felt different, heavier. Like the moment before a storm no one mentions, but everyone senses. Staff moved with exaggerated care. Doors closed too quickly. Conversations stopped when someone approached. My body noticed before my mind did. My back straightened, my breathing sharpened. The night before, the final piece had moved on its own. I was passing near the administrative office when I heard voices behind the door. I didn't need to get closer. Names were spoken without caution. The last name I already recognized, my son's name, and a short sentence said with too much confidence. He signed, trusting you'd take care of everything. That was it. There was no internal scream, no tears. There was silence, a heavy silence, the kind that reorganizes everything inside you. My son hadn't just left me at that nursing home. He had delegated, transferred, handed my autonomy over to someone who promised to solve an inconvenient problem. Not out of open cruelty, but convenience, relief, the belief that this would be easier. I hadn't been abandoned on impulse. I had been managed. I felt it in my body like a weight at the center of my chest. I breathed slowly, deeply, not to contain emotion, but to avoid getting lost in it. Because in that moment, I understood everything. The man who ran that place didn't need to appear. He operated through flexible rules, strategic evaluations, adjustable records. He offered something extremely valuable to tired children: peace of mind. The promise that they wouldn't have to decide anymore, that someone else would take control. In exchange, he got everything. I understood why my documents had been handed over so easily, why my son's name had been used as leverage, why that administrative meeting had happened. They needed me quiet, not because I was dangerous, but because I was too lucid for the role they had written for me. That morning,
something happened that they didn't control. An inspection, unannounced, unscheduled, official. It wasn't caused directly by me, but I knew someone had spoken too early. Someone had protected themselves too soon. Abusive systems don't collapse from frontal attacks. They collapse from overconfidence. The nursing home shifted into a strange kind of motion. Staff rushed. Files were reviewed in haste. Some residents were moved to their rooms before schedule. Others were suddenly treated with desperate kindness. Kindness like that is never spontaneous. It's fear. I was called in to talk again. This time, they used my full name, offered me a chair, asked how I was feeling. Small concessions appeared out of nowhere, as if they'd always been possible. Everything felt too calm. When they asked if I had anything to say, I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give a speech. I described. Exact times, exact phrases, sudden changes, the withholding of documents, the constant use of my son's name as justification, the veiled threats of evaluation, all in order, without visible emotion, just facts. As I spoke, I watched something shift on the faces in front of me. People who build abusive systems rely on one thing: that the victim will unravel emotionally, that pain will turn into exaggeration, that age will turn into disbelief. They were not prepared for precision. The silence after my words was dense. They didn't promise me anything then. They didn't need to. The official narrative had cracked. There were outside eyes now, formal questions, documents being requested. And then, that same day, my son arrived. He didn't come as a savior. He came confused, displaced, smaller than I remembered. When he saw me sitting there, upright, steady, speaking firmly, something in him gave way. He expected a tired mother. He found someone too intact to fit the story he'd been told. He tried to explain, said he thought he was doing the right thing, that they reassured him, that they said I wouldn't handle change well, that it would be safer this way. He used familiar words: care, protection, well-being. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I said something simple but final: that caring isn't deciding for someone who can still decide for herself. That love isn't outsourcing conscience. That convenience can never cost dignity. He didn't answer. There is no answer to give. In that moment, control shifted. Not because someone was arrested, not because the nursing home closed, because the official story collapsed. Staff began speaking more carefully. Rules started being reviewed. Residents were called by name more often. Nothing exploded, but everything changed. A few weeks later, documents were returned, evaluations revised, visits allowed without filtering. The system didn't fall completely. Systems rarely do, but it was exposed enough to never function the same way again. My son tried to reconnect, not with demands, with shame. I didn't accept immediately. Repair doesn't grow from shock. It grows from accountability. I stayed there for a while longer, but I walk the hallways differently now, head high, steps firm, my name spoken correctly, not because I defeated anyone, but because I'd stopped being underestimated. The man who ran that place never spoke to me again. He didn't need to. People like that know when the game has changed. I didn't destroy anyone. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I observed, connected, and spoke at the right moment. And that was enough. Because the greatest justice I achieved wasn't against them. It was against the version of myself that had spent a lifetime believing she needed to stay silent to keep the peace. There, in the place where they tried to erase me, I repositioned myself. And when control changed hands, there was no celebration. There was something better: clarity. After everything came to light, the silence changed its weight. It was no longer the imposed silence that made you shrink as you walked the hallways. It became an attentive, cautious silence, as if the entire place had suddenly learned it needed to measure every gesture. The walls were the same. The sharp smell of cleaning products remained, but something there had lost its rigidity. My body noticed before my mind did. My shoulders began to relax without me telling them to. My breathing grew deeper. I no longer felt that constant pressure in my chest when crossing the hallways. A small thing, perhaps, but after weeks of living on alert, it was enormous. I began to be called by my name, not always warmly. There was still caution, but with respect. They asked before deciding. Simple, almost mundane things. Now or later, is this comfortable for you? Small questions return big parts of who you are. Some staff members seemed insecure, like people walking on ground that had already given way once. Others looked relieved, almost grateful they no longer had to pretend nothing was wrong. The system hadn't disappeared, but it was exposed, and exposed systems move more slowly. The other women began approaching little by little, not to ask for help, but to observe, to confirm whether it was possible to exist there without erasing yourself. I saw in their eyes the same question I'd asked weeks earlier. How far can you go without losing everything? My son tried to talk to me more than once. There was no urgency now, no control. He seemed smaller, more human. Not the confident man who signed papers without reading everything, but someone facing his own omission. I listened when I felt ready. I told him that understanding isn't the same as forgiving, that the time he saved by leaving me there had cost far too much, that rebuilding requires presence, not explanations. He listened in silence. For the first time, he didn't try to decide for me. Visits began happening with fewer obstacles. Some women received family members after years. Others simply sat near the phone, knowing they could call if they wanted to. Not all of them did, but knowing they could was already a form of freedom. There were good days and difficult ones. Justice doesn't erase everything, but it changes the weight of what remains. I still felt tiredness, resentment, an old sadness that doesn't disappear overnight. The difference was that I no longer carried it alone or in silence. I walked the hallways with firmer steps, not in defiance, in belonging. I no longer felt like an intruder in my own life. I took up space without apologizing for it. During that phase, I understood something essential. Winning isn't about reversing roles. It isn't about making the other afraid. It's about leaving the position of target. It's about reclaiming the right to choose, even within limits. The nursing home was still there, so was I. But now, no one decided for me without looking me in the eye. And for someone who had been left behind, that alone was a profound form of repair. Today, when I walk down the hallways, no one looks away. Not out of fear, out of recognition. I am no longer a room number, a case file, a problem to be managed. I am a woman who reclaimed her place, even inside a space that once tried to reduce me to silence. The nursing home still has its schedules, its rules, its overly bright walls. Nothing turned into a fairy tale. There are still hard days, there are still limits, but one thing has changed for good. I no longer feel invisible. And when invisibility ends, the world has to reorganize itself around you. I see it in small things, a more careful tone of voice, a question asked before a decision, my name spoken correctly, Simple gestures, almost ordinary, yet they restore something essential that had been taken from us little by little: dignity. Some women still choose silence. Others have started to speak more. Not in grand speeches, just small ones. A request made without apology, a no said without guilt. I watch it all like someone recognizing seeds slowly taking root, each in her own time, in her own way. My son visits me differently now. He sits, he listens, he doesn't decide. He is still learning how to live with the weight of what he did. I am learning not to carry that weight for him. Love isn't absorbing another person's mistake. Love is also boundaries, and boundaries, even when they come late, are still necessary. I don't know exactly what our future will look like, and for the first time, that doesn't scare me, because the future is no longer being decided in closed rooms by people who talk about me as if I weren't present. I learned something late, but I learned it whole. Silence isn't a virtue when it erases you. Patience isn't submission when it prepares the right moment. And dignity doesn't age. It only goes dormant when someone convinces you that you're no longer worth the effort. I wasn't abandoned. I was underestimated, and there is a vast difference between the two. Abandonment tries to break you. Underestimation gives you room to stand up without being noticed. Today, when someone says my name, I answer with the certainty of someone who knows exactly who she is. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to raise my voice. I exist, and that alone is enough to force the world around me to adjust. If this story touched a quiet place inside you, know this: you are not alone. Many of us were taught to disappear to keep the order, but it's never too late to reappear. Like, share, and tell me in the comments if any part of this story felt like yours. Sometimes telling it is the first step toward reclaiming your place. I reclaimed mine.